Well, hello everyone again. As you know, I'm Connie Nolder. I am a political consultant, and I've been working with FAIR for the last couple of years, the Families and Individuals for Reform. With me, so that's just a little bit about me, but again, you already heard my bio at the beginning of last session. I want to introduce to you Gina Wilt. Gina has been working with me. Well, we've actually been working on and off with each other for a number of years, and joined my firm a couple of years ago. You want to flip through the next slide? Okay. But prior to joining my firm, Gina was the senior legislative aide to Senator Scott Oelslager, who was the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, which is the most powerful committee at the State House. So she was working on the budget for 6 years, and she has a very professional reputation, effective reputation with legislators, with lobbyists, interested parties, the media, and has worked a lot also on coalition building. So we kind of have a little bit of different perspective, because I've really been doing the direct lobbying for a long time, where Gina has both the experience of being in the State House and working for an influential member of the Ohio Senate, as well as doing some lobbying as well. Go ahead, Gina, you want to say hello?
We'll see if this works. Oh, good. It works fine. Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's great to be able to work with Connie, who has been my mentor since like 2000. It's been a while.
Showing our age here.
Just from even when I was in the office working with Senator Oelslager, just a really good example of how to do the job right. Not all lobbyists are created equal. There's a lot of great ones. Connie's definitely one of those who puts the work into it. So I was able to learn from her, which was really good. So
well, thank you. It's
nice to be here.
Yeah, and thanks all of you for being here. We want to make this interactive. So I know the last session, we didn't even get the opportunity to ask questions, and you may have some from the last session. So we're going to make this interactive in our presentation. So if you have a question, just interrupt us. We're very casual. And then at the end of it, what we're going to do is we're going to make all of you put your advocacy skills to work, and we're going to pass out some subject matters, and your table's going to coordinate and come up with some ideas on maybe how you come up with your best 3 arguments. So what we'll do is we'll start out with just sort of 10 points, kind of the way we do it when we engage and advocate for legislative changes. Okay, the first one is determine your goals with the political climate in mind. And I think the best way to do this is to have a group of people and brainstorm. And obviously, go ahead. I don't know if Barb made them or not, but you know what, I'm happy to, we can follow up or make sure, because we won't be here tomorrow, but we can make copies and get them to you all if you'd like. So anyway, brainstorm. You really have to think about, you may all think, let's just get rid of the sex offender registry. And again, we speak specifically Ohio. I know there's a lot of people who are here from other states, but a legislator is probably not going to jump to that issue. So I think, but you have to, talk with people, again, sort of throw ideas out there. What would help your particular group? What would help your particular family member? What would help you in changing the laws? But I look at the first thing is to do some brainstorming, but in addition, think about the political climate that you're in. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to throw my R's out right now, because I think this is a good point for that, and kind of goes into your number 2. Really figuring out what that goal is. I mean, not to spend too much time on this, but I think Connie's right. That is your number 1 thing. If you don't start out with a strong foundation of what your plan is, what your strategy is going to be, then it's not going to fall into place like it should. So I have you might have other R's, so you could throw them out. But and Connie has her P's. I have my R's. So you want to make sure that your goal has relevance. And of course that, timing is a part of relevance. So recency, that you have reliable information, and that you have the research to back it up. And another word that I thought of too that also starts with R that Senator Eklund kind of reminded me of is rational, which kind of goes to relevance a little bit, but you want your goal to be rational, knowing the political climate.
Right, and I believe the NARSOL changed from reform to rational, right? Which I think was, that's a smart move. So the next issue, again, is research your issue, just to kind of back up with what Gina said. And why I asked Barb the question I did is because that is a very, very typical question that a lot of legislators ask. People are afraid of doing things sometimes if it's not been done in any other state. So if you research what's been done in other states, and again, in the particular issue of the sex offender registry, and you see that all of a sudden there wasn't they reduced the restrictions or they removed some restrictions, and there wasn't a spike in sex offenses, then that gives legislators a greater comfort. So I think researching, again, what's been done in the past, what have other states done, current and past court cases, and again, the whole goal is to make the legislator who you're trying to influence comfortable with the proposal. You have anything to add? You want to go into 3?
So educate yourself on your audience. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Is there any place that you can go to, like online, to see what the bills are, what has passed, what hasn't passed?
Yeah.
For the state of Ohio?
That's an excellent question. And Gina, do you?
I don't know if everyone heard her. I think you had a pretty good voice that flowed out. But finding a spot to find all of that information in state to state.
Right. And now, as a person who does this day in and day out, there are news services that you can subscribe to, but they're expensive. They're $250 a month, so a lot of people don't, want to do that. As this is my business, so that's the way I follow things. But there are the websites, just ohiosenate.gov and ohiohouse.gov, and those websites are actually, they've gotten better. I think you can go in and you can find legislation that's been introduced. If you see an article in the newspaper and it doesn't have a bill number, but it has it's Senator Eklund or Senator Skindle or Senator Olslager, you can go and click on their name and see legislation that they've recently introduced.
And as far as state to state information, like the National Conference of State Legislatures, there's the Council on State Governments. There are definitely groups that track information, and yeah, we at the state level in Ohio, we have the Legislative Service Commission. They're professional drafters, they're analysts, financial analysts, they're lawyers and researchers. They have their masters and PhDs in research. So we can look through a legislative office. We work with those drafters, and they have access to all kinds of stuff, case law throughout the whole nation, and they have those resources, and they go to those conferences, and they're all separated by areas of knowledge, so criminal, civil, and then even breakdowns in between those groups. So.
And while you're walking over there, Gina, just one other thing I wanted to add is don't be afraid of calling legislators. I mean, you will get better response if it is your legislator and you live in his or her district. But, they do have staff. Some staff are better than others, unfortunately. But just say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I am interested in this issue where it looked like, Senator Skindle's name's on the bill. Can you give me any background? So and that's really our goal today, is to just give you all a little bit more comfort in advocating for yourselves.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this, by the way.
Oh, sure.
How important do you think it is to understand the intent of the bill when it's written, and to engage the legislator or the sponsor of the bills on their intent and providing research, evidence, et cetera, that may be contrary to their intent? Like, here's the consequences of what this is going to create. Have you thought about this? Because here's the data.
Right. Excellent question. I think Wendy Tarr's presentation was good, because when they came out with this violent registry, violent offense registry, there are a lot of groups who said, registries don't work anyway. Why are we doing this? Now, at the same time, again, back to my P's, polite, being one of them, is framing your arguments, but again, the intent, a lot of times people, as we know, particularly in this issue, people react. When we just, for any of you who are from the Columbus area, I don't know, Reagan Toks was a student at Ohio State, and she was raped and murdered, and the individual who was the person who did this had a convicted felon, and he was also on the sex registry. And so now there's a piece of legislation pending in the General Assembly called the Reagan Toks Act. You know, you guys, all the other acts that have come because of a response, and even the bill, the Violent Offender Registry that Wendy Tarr was talking about, is called Sierra's Law because of a situation of an individual who was killed up in Senator Gardner's district. So we need to do that because unfortunately you know, the headlines are all about this person, that, you know, the news coverage and that sort of stuff. So making sure that they understand what we call unintended consequences, and presenting those arguments. So excellent question. Gina, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, I just think being upfront about, you know, you have, if you have that experience and if you're working with people and you've kind of done this before and you know what's coming, get it out there. You know, let that legislator know this is what's coming. You know, they don't want any surprise. These are the pros, these are the cons. This is what you're going to hear. Just have that all up front. Just all, you know, the true consequences, the unintended consequences, everything. I would just put it up front.
Gina, he has a question right here at the middle table. Didn't you? Did you? Right here.
Question?
Put your arm up there.
Oh, sorry.
By the time I'm here, my question will be out of my mind. I'll forget. No, I was wondering in terms of, because there's research, you're providing a lot of evidence, but if what I always hear is that a lot of these things, like you said, are reactionary and more politically motivated. I mean, how do you prevent facts that go against political
well, sort of
benefits
political
that may
appetite.
provide? How do you do that?
Yeah, and it's tough. And quite honestly, I've probably represented more groups defending you know, or opposing bad legislation than in proposing good legislation, is because generally, I mean, legislators want to know. They want to be knowledgeable. They want information, but they are people who are either elected every 2 years, 4 years, or maybe 6 years, and you know, they want to keep their job. So it's just, I try to, and we'll continue to go through this, but keeping the message simple, providing good information, and again, and actually not providing too much. You can do it in, here's our one pager. I try to get all my clients to narrow their message to one page. And then the two senators we had here, because they're lawyers, tend to read a lot more. There's a lot of senators who, or representatives who might just look at that front page and the bullet points. So I hope that answered you. Sure.
And I think that educate yourself on your audience. Know if your audience is the legislator, like know that Senator Eklund, Senator Skandell, they do read, so you can give them information. But if you know, get to know that legislator. If your legislator is just not a reader, they might be a good person, they're just not a reader. Then you just have to narrow it to that one page, like Connie said.
Yeah, I was just wondering. So I had heard at one point in time that legislation that's named after a person is like really bad legislation. I mean, generally that's a really bad thing to do, is to name something after another person. So have you ever like challenged on it or kind of emphasized that point to the legislators? Or?
Well, I think even in Wendy's presentation when she said reactionary, yeah, which then Senator Eklund said, you know, I don't want to be called a reactionary, but again, it's, you know, again, Megan's Law or Adam Walsh and all those other laws that have passed. You know, I think when people put a name on it, okay, people can relate. So legislators again feel more inclined because of, you know, really. But we have some good legislators right now who are questioning, should we really do this? You know, and we have, and they make some bold statements in committee, which I love to hear. You know, like, you know, not that you don't have sympathy for the individual who was murdered or whatever, but who should we be changing the law for this one particular? Yes. So, and just to follow up on point 3 again, educate yourself to your audience. If you do go and get a meeting with the legislator, pull him up, read his bio. Perhaps, if you live, and I encourage people more to do back home lobbying than at the State House. At the State House, they may have, well, Gina, from your experience with Senator Olslager, meetings every 15 minutes. Where if they're back in the district and you can meet them for a cup of coffee, even Senator Eklund spent quite a bit of time after this hearing to talk with people, which was great because he's not in session today. So, Andy? Yeah, no, okay, sorry.
I subscribe to an organization that does a lot of political activism, and they send out a blast for, then you click a button, and that sends a form letter to, it finds your local person and sends off a form letter. So my first question is, do those have any level of impact? Second one is, would it then, to make it more effective, translate that to script, something that you could then call them? How much more impact would that have?
I'm going to let Gina respond to this as someone who spent a lot of time in a legislator's office. And then, of course, I have my opinion, too. But
Yes, I don't think those are effective. They would come into our office. I worked for a state senator who was a very experienced legislator, and they just come in, they're just forms. So, we print them off. Oh, you got, 10 of these, and, but they're all the same. There was no personal time put into it, and so we didn't really put a lot of stock in those. I think it makes a much bigger difference if you are, sorry, I kind of forgot to sing down. It makes a bigger difference if it's you wrote the letter, you're a real person, you're not just some, sometimes we even question, is this a real person? And a lot of times those programs like change.org or whatever, you get the same name 4 different times on 4 different issues in one day, and you're like, well, what do they care about? Do they care about guns? Do they care about life? Do they care, what do they really care about? And you're just kind of confused, and you think, is this a real person? So I don't think it's effective.
But to counter that, do you then think that having some professional, such as an organization like you, would have the skills to point the conversation in a specific direction, instead of me typing for an hour and rambling, to have a message really targeted and crafted to send off?
I mean, I think if they have a good message, you could use that message, but still make it your own.
that's exactly what I was going to say, is if you do, and I think that's a great way to stay active and to know what's going on, is to get on those, certain mailing lists and belong to certain groups. Take that message, and rather than just shooting off that, where they're almost doing it for you, look at the message and put it in your own words. And it is not, if you go to those websites, the ohiohouse.gov or the ohiosenate.gov, there's tons of information on those websites that you can really find a lot. So.
And if you're trying to build a relationship with your lawmaker, I think that sending them form letters is not the way to build that relationship.
Right. I'm loud. Okay.
Thanks. As a state leader with, I don't know how many paid members we have at this point, 1,200 or whatever, we're constantly trying to get our members to be active. Mm-hmm. And during legislative session, if there's a particular bill, we want them to write or we want them to call. And they get so flustered about, well, what am I going to say? Mm-hmm. Or what should I write? Or I don't have time, and can you give me something? So I actually had an LA from our speaker's office tell me, this is turned off, so I don't know why it's doing that. Sorry. Has said to me that when somebody contacts us and the messages are basically the same talking points, if it's a phone call, or they write to us, we look at it and say, okay, so if we get 10 letters, it's actually 100 people are thinking this way. And they have this math that they do, which math isn't my best suit, but I know that's a whole nother deal. How important is it, for a legislator to actually hear from a number of individuals in their state, even if it's not their constituent, because if they sit on like the CJ committee or they sit on judiciary or family, health, welfare, and families, if you're hearing the same thing over and over, even if it's a form letter, do they not take anything from that?
And Gina and I, we might have a little different opinion. I think there was during, if you all remember the collective bargaining, SB 5, it made a lot of headlines. Now there were thousands and thousands of postcards and letters, and when you're receiving thousands, and even though it's the same message, it was a lot of union members who did it. So that does have some impact, again, based upon who the member is. I do think if there's 10, that number, and again, it matters to the legislator. I think Senator Oldslager, who Gina worked for, would, because he reads everything. There are other legislators who just might not be as influenced. What's that?
How to read, because they don't read anything, and they'll tell you right out when you call, yeah, I know you sent me something, I didn't read that.
Yeah.
But you're testifying on that bill, you're going to vote on that bill, do you have the information? I didn't read that.
Yeah.
So, but my colleague told me.
Right.
So you hope somebody reads it, right?
Right. Anything else? I want to get through this only because we want to turn it over to all you. So, one more real quick, and then we'll go on to the next point.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
What about polls? I mean, a lot of time you see online things like change.org, and it says something like, vote to remove the registry. Mm-hmm. Click here to vote. Mm-hmm. And then it says, we have 1,000 people signed already. We're aiming for 3,000 people. Is that ever looked at?
I think in Ohio, the liberal folks, I guess, or the Democratic Party maybe looks at it, but the Republican Party sees it as not their thing and maybe kind of opposed to them. So it's not effective in Ohio just because we're Republican.
Yeah, and just to further that is, if it's a certain organization like which organization was it? Change.org.
Well, that was the one that I used.
Sure, but
I mean, I've seen it
move
pop up
on.
my
right, move
email
on.
a lot.
But the people who get that are mostly of like-mindedness. So if again, as Senator Skindle, who might try to help use it in one of his arguments, I think that's fine. Is it going to change Senator Eklund's opinion? No, because again, it's like-minded individuals who are getting sent the survey and going to, so.
So would that be more like a form letter?
Yeah. And again, let's where are we? We're just on number 4. And one of my biggest messages is just know your audience. And we'll get to the makeup of the Ohio General Assembly here. But okay. The fourth one is stay engaged in current affairs, and it's just important, and that goes back to even number 1, the political climate. So if you do want to either support or oppose a particular piece of legislation, figure out what's going on, and again, if somebody who was just murdered someone and they were on the sex offender registry, it's not probably the right time to introduce, that's what the word we use, but introduce your piece of legislation. So, and again, also it's like the gun reform and the school shootings and, the activism by students seem to be making a little bit bigger a difference after Parkland and some of these school shootings. So just, I encourage you to, whatever your method is, if you're a lot younger than me, it's probably much more social media. I am still the traditional, get the Columbus Dispatch every morning, and that's the first thing I do is I read the paper from top to bottom, and then I go and I get all the news clips from around the state, and I read those just because I want to stay current. Because these are the people you're trying to influence are people who are influenced by what's out in the news. So.
And then she'll text me like 3 stories in the morning that, you need to read these. Okay.
And of course, I get the old-fashioned newspaper, and Gina says I'll pull it up online. Okay, number 5.
So develop a simple and effective message, which we've talked some about, and I know Connie probably has, do you have
Yes.
another thought?
Yes, I am all about, I have this thing about keeping it to 3 points, because legislators are inundated with meetings, with information, some stuff they read, some stuff they don't read. And if you, and we'll get to this too, but if you walk out of a legislative office and they don't really know what you're talking about because you talked about 7 different things, and so they walk out and they're thinking, I can't remember, and all of a sudden the next person comes in on a whole different issue. So, the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, it's what you got to do. It's just what you have to do. And it's hard when you have so much good information that you want to share. And at the same time, you just think you've got 15 minutes or so with that individual. So I try to boil it down to the 3 main points. And again, part of the practice of doing that is writing it out, going in with a script, going in with your 1-pager, and just keep that message very simple.
And role play. Connie would make me role play with her before I would go into an office.
Yeah.
Just because it helps,
She
and
did
it really, if you practice it and you have to say it out loud, it really does help. Begin meeting with legislators, key state agency personnel, and other interested parties.
Yeah, and again, going back to the simple message. And so for example, and we use Senate Bill 235, which is the bill that I've been advocating, working with Barb on, and FAIR, is we thought, who cares about this issue? Okay? And Ohio Public Defender's Office, Ohio Criminal Sentencing Commission, the Supreme Court, the Judicial Conference, the AG's office, the Ohio Prosecutors Association, the victims groups. And so we started meeting with everybody to say, this is a piece of legislation we're going to introduce, and what are your thoughts? And through that process, you get a lot of good feedback. And what I say on issues that have to do with the sex offender registry, if people aren't just saying, oh, no, I can't talk about it, then that's a good thing. If we're not getting newspaper articles that are negative, that's a good thing. Because people are going like, that kind of that makes sense, those sorts of things. So that's what we do, is we reached out, and like we said, we're one of the few groups that we actually got the Prosecutors Association to support this particular proposal. So.
Evaluate your arguments, following feedback from meetings, fine-tune your message. And I think this is really critical, because you might go in, hopefully you have a strong foundation, you have a good strategy in place, but you do have to be somewhat flexible. If you've gone and met with your interested parties, you've met with some stakeholders and maybe even a potential bill sponsor, and they're giving you feedback, you really do have to take that back to your group and go back to your original plan and be flexible and fine-tune your message.
And I kind of call it the throwing spaghetti up against the wall and see what sticks. And then that helps you really determine, okay, what arguments fly here? And again, going back to this bill, our original bill was different than the bill that we have today, based upon the discussions we had with interested parties.
And then once legislation is, or identify key legislator to introduce your proposal.
And I mean, the legislator, why we chose Senator Eklund was, number one, he's a Republican and he's in the majority. Very few minority bills get passed, whether you're in Congress, whether you're in some other state legislature. But in Ohio, it's very, very Republican dominated. As well as he was the former chair of the Criminal Justice Committee. He's passionate about criminal justice reform. Senator Skindle was one of the first legislators we went to, because he has a real passion for this issue as well. But he said, I'm a Democrat. If you want me to co-sponsor a bill, I will. But if you don't want me to be a co-sponsor, just let me know, because he wants to get it done. And so Senator Eklund introduced it as the main sponsor, and then we got another Republican and him as a Democrat as co-sponsors. So. That's how we chose him. But a lot of legislators have issues like education. So if you're going to be talking about an education issue, you're going to go to the chair of the education committee, that sort of thing. So you just kind of got to research and figure out. And again, with Googling, you can find a lot of stuff out.
Yeah, and knowing who has kind of influence too with like leadership, and you don't want to pick a key legislator who has absolutely no friends. And like Senator Eklund, he has great relationships with the leaders who, ultimately your bill has to go through the rules and reference process, has to get to the floor. So if you're not in with the Senate president, then, so it's good to know that your legislator is friendly and has good relationships within his own caucus.
Question back there?
Are both their terms up this year?
No, Senator Skindle is, but he's going back to the House. So with term limits, you can serve an 8-year term. In the House, you're elected every 2 years. In the Senate, it's 4. And Senator Skindle started in the House, then went to the Senate, and is now going back to the House.
He did get elected. He was elected to do that, so.
Yeah, right. So, and then Senator Eklund would be up, I think, in 20, because he started in 12. So, and I hope he would go to the House. He's just such a good legislator. I mean, he's just, you love people like that in the General Assembly who take this so seriously.
It sounded a minute ago like you were suggesting that having a legislator of the opposite party as a co-sponsor was negative. And I would never imagine that. I would have thought that being able to say, oh, it has bipartisan support,
right,
was that's kind of a golden phrase. But
and I may have misspoke. That wasn't what I was trying to say. Senator Skindle said, I want to help out in this issue. If it's helpful to me to be on there, I will be. If it's not helpful, in our initial discussions with him. And so yes, if you can have bipartisanship, that's great. And then sometimes you have joint sponsors, and we just collectively decided on this particular issue that Eklund would be the main, and then we had co-sponsors. So no, bipartisan. You're absolutely correct, and I didn't mean to say it, but I may have misspoke. Sorry. Yes.
So in my state, I actually had the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee supporting the amendment to, but he told me, he said, Greg, if we go forward, this is not, there's no support, so yeah, it's not going to go anywhere. So I hate to tell you, but I'm in violent agreement with what you're saying, but it's not going to go anywhere.
And then you got to keep trying. You got to go to all the other members in the caucus. I mean, we have met with every single member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Republicans and Democrats, on this particular piece of legislation. It's slow. Boy, I mean, I would have loved to have this passed, 6 months ago, but it's a slow process. And I think as individual advocates, what's really hard is that you think, oh, there was a chance that this was going to move forward. You had a couple of good conversations, but it's that persistency. You got to just keep at it. And I think go to that legislator and go back and say, who do I need to talk to? Who is the one who's most opposed to this? And try to build some support. And then if you kind of find out what's going on and who are generally, I mean, there's some legislators who are just, I'm tough on crime, I'm tough on crime, I'm tough on crime. I'm never going to support anything that would reform criminal justice. But you go in, you tell your story, they're human, and you just got to keep working it. That's the best advice I can give you. And send information, send letters, try to build up some support within your community to get other people to send letters and make phone calls and that sort of thing. So, okay. Right. Okay.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
Going back to the talking point, which is not on this slide,
okay,
the one previously where you're picking your sponsor or
yes,
your champion. We also pick our champion on the House side at the same time, or pick one because you have to be ready.
Right. There is, are you Ohio?
Connecticut.
Okay. We do there is companion legislation in Ohio, which you can get a bill introduced in the House and introduced in the Senate. And we think about, I mean, there are some pieces of legislation, they're usually feel-good pieces of legislation a lot of times, that you want both that process. What happens sometimes, unfortunately, is that on tough issues, the person in the House might say, oh, they're going to deal with it in the Senate, and the person in the Senate goes, they're going to deal with it in the House, and then you have, and number one, we have limited resources, limited resources who can be involved in meetings and that sort of thing, is it's kind of like when you have co-chairs of a committee, and so you don't have somebody who's kind of taking full ownership. So it is a question. I mean, we do still work with members of the House, even though the bill's not over there yet. So we do keep in touch with members of the House. Senator Seitz, who used to be in the Senate, now he's in the House. We originally tried to get amendment through during lame duck, and both Senator Eklund and Senator Seitz were willing to do it. Senator Seitz is the communications, well, he's now the majority whip in the House, very influential, and he's on board with our stuff. So, yes, we do that sometimes, but you got to keep the communication going. But we chose to just start in the Senate, where we knew we already had some real support. So.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of companion legislation, but that's Ohio. I don't know how other states operate, unless it's like a road naming bill or a flag or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sure it's companion legislation though, but if it goes to the Senate, we don't have a watch list or a go list. So you don't know when it's going, and if it gets through, then it goes to the House, and you only have a short window. And again,
you know what, and that's just a different process than Ohio.
okay.
Yeah, so I think, and again, I know we're talking specifically to Ohio, and I know there's, like I said, there's people that aren't from Ohio, but Ohio has a process where it goes through the House, through the Senate committee, goes to the House, goes through the House committee, and then if they don't, and we're going to talk about the basics. You guys, I really want to get you guys involved in this, so let's just finish this real quick, and I'm sorry, because I love this interactiveness, and I love these questions. These are excellent.
This last question.
Okay.
Does it, I guess the approach, let's say that a particular representative, whatever, cares very much about education, right?
Right.
Okay, then, does it work going in, and they're going to vote on a bill that could be beneficial to the registry and the cause, right? Could you go in presenting what that bill would do to their care of education and kind of
Yes.
present it that way?
Yeah, actually, the chairwoman of the Senate Education Committee, Peggy Lehner from the Dayton area, is a co-sponsor on this bill. And I think she actually related to it because she thinks about kids. So on that particular thing, but I mean, I try everybody. I just, it's just like, because sometimes people surprise you. I know Barb and I went into a meeting with Senator Coley, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a tough meeting. And he goes, nah, yeah, this makes sense. I'm with you. So, okay. Once legislation is introduced, the process begins, and then that's back to the basics. And we will get you, I apologize, but on this slide, you want to just flip to that real quick, Gina? Back to the basics. Just the formal, and again, this is Ohio, so different states have different procedures. Also, some states have a 60-day legislative cycle. We have, they're in most of the year. So every state's a little bit different, as well as Congress is different, but this is kind of the formal process. So that's where you start the formal process, and then you just stay engaged, stay persistent but polite, and don't give up. And what we would like you guys to do now is I have topics to pass out, and as a table, so it's your turn. Do we have that last slide, Gina? Kind of outlines it. Look at this topic. If you don't like it, we can try to come up with another, but we didn't want to spend a lot of time because I know we don't have a lot of time. Just passing these out. I hope we have enough. Okay, thank you. So look at your topic and collectively try to come up with your 3 best arguments. And then what we're going to do, and I hope we can get to every table, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to, but have someone who's willing to stand up and give those 3 arguments. And Gina and I will walk around, so if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them while we do that. And we're just going to take, what do I have, quarter till? We're going to have to narrow it. How about 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay? Thanks. Oh, turn me up. Okay, thanks. Who wants to start? Who's ready? Who, ready? Here? Denny, your table? You guys ready? Okay. All right, everybody, let's listen to these arguments. Some of these topics are the same because, am I in the wrong place? We want to keep it very, where should I stand? Okay. Oh, okay. But again, this was just a good exercise. It goes back to the very beginning of what we talked about, is brainstorming and what makes good arguments. So, all right, and just a couple minutes and we'll just keep moving so everybody gets it. I know we're getting late on time here.
Okay, mine's eliminate residency.
Okay, do you want to stand up? Yeah.
Okay, ours was eliminate residency restrictions, and we felt that it would increases homelessness which would actually increase recidivism rate and other crimes. It would separate families, and it would make it difficult for people to have jobs because they couldn't get ready for work in the morning or anything like that.
Excellent. Love it. How about you guys? Are you ready?
It's hard to get a job when you don't have an address to put on your application.
Okay, our topic was make sex registry private for law enforcement only. And I think the first thing to note about this is it's not eliminating the sex registry, it's just making it private, only visible to law enforcement. Okay, so it's not doing away with the registry. And our arguments are that there's no evidence that a public registry actually increases public safety. A public registry prevents and it hinders registrants from reintegrating into society, and it's not cost effective. It's expensive to maintain a public registry where you have to send out notices. Every time someone moves, you have to have someone come in, take a picture, send out a postcard with a face on it, and we just don't think that the cost of that is justified.
Very good. These are excellent. Next table. You want to go right here? I know there's just two of you.
Over here.
We talked about something else.
Oh, you didn't listen to the teacher?
Our topic was make sex registry private for law enforcement only. So our arguments were false sense of security to the public, or is there a danger to the public? Also, the reality of public registry is too broad, and the average reader really doesn't know what they're reading. They don't understand it. And then the last one was it definitely hinders reentry into society.
Awesome. How about the next table then, Gina? You want to go back one more? Yeah.
Okay. Ours was eliminate sex offender registry for low-risk offenders. And our arguments for that would be the money that it would save the states, and maybe use that money for transitional housing and support groups for people. Putting them on the registry creates homelessness and joblessness due to the residency restrictions, and consider the recidivism statistics for someone that's been arrested for a low-risk offense.
Very good.
The housing issue, I think, is a good one.
Gina also represents the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing, so it's an issue near and dear to her heart.
Okay, ours was to eliminate the notification on driver's license, notation on the driver's license. And our 3 reasons were, we think it's just a form of public shaming, discrimination, and it opens you up to harassment. It serves absolutely no public safety issue. It might even encourage people not to reapply for licenses so that they can avoid having that. And there's an unnecessary cost associated with identifying this that would serve no purpose.
Great.
There may have been something else that I didn't
Okay, is that
Ours is the same exact thing. It's just ditto to them. So.
Well, good. But see, what I'm loving is that you guys are making these arguments simple, easy to understand, and you walk away, a legislator would walk away going, that makes sense.
Ours was eliminate sex offender registry for low-risk offenders. We needed another half an hour to decide what a low-risk offender was, whether we were talking about people who are low risk of reoffending, or whether the crime they committed was just not very serious.
Okay.
And so we really got stuck on that. In terms of eliminating, though, I imagine what you would, the main arguments would be it would allow law enforcement to concentrate on a smaller number. By not having people that are low risk on the registry, it would allow whatever resources are available to concentrate on those who are higher risk. But of course, this violates what many of us believe, that there shouldn't be a registry at all. And that argument kind of reinforces the idea that a lot of people should be on the registry. So we're kind of stuck in that situation.
Right.
And also, by having fewer people on the registry, obviously save resources.
Yeah, good. I know this is tough too, because I mean, what you really believe and what you potentially might get passed. And as we go through this process in the legislature, we think if we can get this passed and nobody lost their election because there was no bad press release, then you go on to the next thing. So again, incremental change.
We also had the eliminate the notation on driver's license, and we had the same arguments as y'all did, but we did add that it could have some unintended consequences of public vigilantism and discrimination, because you have to show your ID in all kinds of situations, and people could retaliate.
Right, right. And it's even more and more so now. I mean, how many times you go to the airport, the only thing you need to do is show your ID. You don't need to bring a ticket. You don't need. So that's, you know, the first thing people say. Yeah,
Who
good
is
argument.
The spokesperson here? That was unanimous.
Our project was eliminate sex offender registry. Let's just get right to it, right?
Right.
And I thought the best thing is first to state what our problem was, and to say a legislator, and to explain that our understanding of the purpose of the sex offender registry is to keep communities safer and to decrease sex offenses.
Right.
And so then the answer to that would be, on our part, that number one, statistics have shown that the registry has not decreased sex offenses, and it gives people a false sense of security.
Right.
They think they're safe because they know sex offenders. However, the third thing is that most sex offenses are perpetrated by first-time offenders who are not on the registry. So for all those reasons, and 100,000 more,
right,
that everybody
your
else has
your
mentioned.
footnotes, your
Everything that everyone else has mentioned.
Right.
There are reasons.
Absolutely.
Please
Good.
listen, somebody.
We got to keep being persistent. No, this table and this table, right, and then we're done. Okay.
Who's our spokesperson?
I'll keep it short. Ours was eliminate the sex offender registry entirely, and our arguments would be that it's not effective, it may potentially increase crime, that it's a slippery slope, and it may lead to this proliferation of other registries that we've seen. And just as a bonus, it's expensive for taxpayers and wasteful
Right.
for the police.
Right.
So.
Excellent. Good job. One last table, right? And then we.
Yes, the same question, eliminate the offender registry entirely. 3 quick points, as have been made before. Evidence and studies, in fact, do not make communities any safer, but perhaps less safer with the registry. It is horrifically expensive to the state to maintain and to the taxpayers, and the destructive collateral damage caused to the innocent, which would be the family members and so forth of the offenders.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes.
One more, I have a table by myself. One other thing is, if it is a civil regulatory scheme, what other, like driver's license or any other thing, do you have to go to the police station and get booked? That you get fingerprinted, you are in a terribly intimidating environment. There's no other civil regulatory scheme like that. Doesn't that mean it's punishment of some sort? That's the point I would like to bring up.
Everybody was excellent. Seriously, really, really good. And I hope this exercise was a little bit helpful in just preparing for your advocacy efforts within, whether in another state, whether, at the congressional level, state level, local level, wherever it is. But it's just, I just encourage you to, stay involved. Yeah, any last questions?
How does somebody find a potential lobbyist in their state that would, get behind something like this?
Hey, Barb. His question was, how do you find a potential lobbyist in your state to get involved in this issue? I thought you'd answer better than me.
Well, it's networking, it's talking to people, talking to attorneys in the field. Oh, I got my. And just interviewing a lot of people and finding many who are not willing to take on the cause. And I was fortunate enough to find Connie, who was.
Well, and also also, if your state has an affiliate, like I'm in Texas, and Texas Voices is doing a lot of that lobbying and advocacy. So if your state has an affiliate, you could start there, or NARSOL affiliate.
Andy's telling me it's time to go, but can we have one quick question? One last question.
Connie and Barb, I don't know if you guys know, but Ohio now, if you're selling your home and your disclosure form, you have to report if there's a sex offender in your neighborhood.
Really? Did you know that, Barb? Really? Well, I've learned a lot, and it's been very eye-opening to me. So, and it's just blatantly unfair. So, I'll do anything I can do here in the state of Ohio to help and give people back their civil rights. So, thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.